We've just come back from the CSU board meeting on November 15th, and we've summarized the most important things to inform you students about. So let's get into it. What happened at this board meeting? So the first thing is the approval of the agenda. There was a motion to add some committee reports to this agenda as late submissions. And there was also a motion to defer the student engagement tabling hours to the next meeting because 4 out of the 5 of the executives were not present for this meeting. The next item on the agenda was public input, and there was a sign up from a student who wanted to come to this meeting and give their public input. However, they didn't confirm. Hopefully, they'll be there at the next meeting. The next agenda item that had items on it was the consent agenda. So on the consent agenda was approval of the previous meeting minutes on November 1st, the request to be excused, as well as the approval of the minutes from the annual general meeting. The next section of the agenda was recommended motions. The first item on this section was the elections administrator request for proposal committee. This committee is a temporary committee that's established to go over the job applications from potential elections administrators who will be the elections administrator for the upcoming election next year. There were 5 positions on this committee. The board member, Sophia Kara, submitted her nomination ahead of time before this meeting. During the meeting, the other self-nominations were Sanchit Kwara, Divyansh Saini, Sukhmanpreet Kaur, and Sukh Sol. Because there were 5 nominations and 5 positions, all of these board members have become the members of this temporary committee that was established to select the next elections administrator. The next item was the annual review of the board committee's policy. The board committee's policy is the board's policy that sets out the basic structure for the board's committees and is the policy under which all of the board's permanent and temporary committees are established. So the board committee policy comes up every year for a review from the board. Because there were no issues seen with the board committee policy, this was approved without any changes and will come back for review next year. The next item that was on this section was the student engagement tabling hours. This was deferred to the next board meeting because 4 out of 5 executives were not present for this meeting to discuss it. The reasons for not being here that were listed in the agenda were a family emergency, personal travel, and personal travel. The next item that was under this section was the review of the elections policy and procedures. First part of this item was making it an offense to discourage complaints during elections. They added a new paragraph that reads, "A candidate must not apply pressure or discourage a person against submitting a complaint. A candidate who violates this rule is deemed to have committed a serious offense. If the elections administrator determines that a board member has violated this rule, then the matter shall be referred to the board of directors." This policy change was approved. So the next change was material impact as consideration in complaints. So this change was deleting the text that said, and that the irregularity or the violation of the rule would have a material effect on the election. Basically, the change that was made was taking away the requirement for a complaint to have a material impact on the election to still be counted as a serious complaint. Having a material effect on the election would look like if someone were to be disqualified, then the results of the election would change. So they've taken that out. It doesn't need to be counted as having a material effect on elections in order to be seriously dealt with. So the next significant change that was made under this policy was the appeal timeframe. In the previous election, the timeline for submitting appeals against complaints was 48 hours, but the elections administrator found that was too short a timeline to come up with a result. The elections administrator's original recommendation was changing 48 hours to 7 days, but the governance committee felt that this was too long of a time period, so they landed on 3 business days. That way, the elections administrator wouldn't need to work over the weekend in order to meet the 48-hour timeline, but it's still a short enough timeline to give candidates updates about the results of their appeals. So under the notice section of the agenda, there was a confidential notice circulated to the board. The next section of the agenda was reports. One thing that stood out during the VP Finance and Services verbal report was sometime in December or January, there's going to be a new charging station installed in the CSU lounge. So it's going to be like a portable charger that you can borrow for 3 hours without charge. And if you borrow it for more than 3 hours, the cost is going to be capped at $5 per use. It's going to be like a physical battery bank that you sign out from the CSU Library Lounge. So that was everything that happened at this CSU board meeting. We will be back at the next CSU board meeting to let you know everything that happens.